Vanakkam. Hello friends. In today's episode in Know Your Roots, we will be exploring the connect between IVC and Tamil civilization in terms of religion and rituals. While evidence of religious practices and rituals in the IVC are found through the seals and the terracotta figurines that have been unearthed, we wouldn't know what was the exact faith that the people followed or the theonyms, the names of their gods, till we are able to decipher their script. So, based on the correlation of known factors, it is largely accepted that it was some sort of Hinduism. And if I were to quote the preeminent Indologist from France, Louis Renaud, who in his masterly work Religions of Ancient India, published in 1953, and I quote, "If the forms of religion revealed in the seals and the figures of the Indus Valley have any remote connection with Indian forms, it is not so much with those of Vedism as with those of Hinduism, a Hinduism which, though known to us only by inference, must have already existed in Vedic times and probably considerably earlier." Close quotations. Inference of Hinduism. The etymology of the word Hindu goes back to 515 BCE, when the Persian king Darius the Great annexed the Indus Valley to his empire, and the Indus came to be known as Hindu in the Persian language. Now we know that in Sanskrit, Indus is known as Sindhu, and hence scholars call it the Sindhu Saraswati civilization. Once again, when the Ionian Greeks under the rule of King Darius couldn't pronounce the H, they converted the term Hindu into Indo and the regions denoting the people as India. When the Persian speaking Mughal emperors came into the country in the 16th century, they named the country Hindustan and the people as Hindus. The British, who followed them, denoted the people of the continent by the term Hindu to differentiate them from the Muslims. Well, there are those who object to the term Hindu, saying that it is a foreign term and they would rather call themselves as followers of Sanatana Dharma, the eternal law or truth. But despite the fact that the term Sanatana Dharma itself is not used to describe any religious faith in any of the ancient texts. Then there are others who object to the term Hinduism on the grounds that it artificially bundles together religions that have different ideologies and cults, such as Saivism, Vaishnavism, and Saktam, and not to mention the fact that many folk deities and rural cults have also been assimilated into Hinduism over the millennia, making it what it is today. If I were to give an example, if we would say that every religion follows a code, then the practices done in our Meenakshi Amman temple here in Madurai are very different from the practices followed by another famed temple here, the Pandi Koil, where on any given day hundreds of goats sacrifice there. But scholars of international repute from Reno to Parpola are very clear about the fact that the evidence from archaeology points at a pre-Vedic religion because of the lack of common factors. If I were to give a couple of examples, Parpola is a very noted Sanskrit scholar. He explains how the Indo-Aryan Vedic people did not worship God in the form of images, and he explains how during the ritualistic sacrifices they called upon these invisible gods to come and sit on the grass mats, the dharbai, near the homam, the sacrificial fire, and partake of the food and the drinks that were offered into the fire, that is the ahudi or the avirbaham, and they poured these food and offerings into the fire, that is the agni, all the while singing hymns in praise of these deities, the Vedas. Whereas the hundreds of seals with votive offerings excavated all over the IVC, as well as the terracotta objects unearthed, are considered to be cult figurines, and these have been unearthed even from the earliest Neolithic site of Mehergarh near Balochistan from 7000 BCE. Second of all, In the Vedic culture, the main form of worship was through the sacrificial fire, the Agni and the Homa. And over the thousands of IVC sites that have been excavated over hundreds of years, archaeological evidence of ceremonial fire pits have not been found. And by practice, these sacrifices and hence the rituals were conducted out in the open, could have been on the banks of a river or deep inside a forest. Whereas Parpola notes how, very interestingly, many of the 500 or so human and animal figurines that are considered to be cult images excavated in Mohenjo-daro are found in small rooms that have a private door in a living quarters, sort of a private space in a house, showing that these objects were given a special status, which is much akin to how we keep our idols in our puja rooms or alcoves. More importantly, Parpola goes on to explain the etymology of the word puja itself from pusai, pusanai, pusu to anoint or smear in Tamil, wherein from ancient times people have had the habit of anointing even a piece of stone with oil and vermilion, which are found in the Harappan Valley itself, as well as from blood of animal sacrifices done. And hence, puja as a word appears much later in Vedic texts, first time appearing in the Grahastha Sutras from 500 BCE. Similarly, the Great Bath and many such water bodies found all over the IVC regions, including even a few areas where staircases, the Paditurai, seem to lead to the branches of the Indus itself, show how ritualistic bath, people coming together and bathing as part of religious faith, seems to have played a very important role in the IVC, much akin to the practice here in our regions, where all the rivers here have the Paditurai, which is known as Kattam, from Katta, Kada, crossing the river, and Parpola shows the etymology of the Hindi word Ghat as coming from Kattam. So, this said and done, many of the figurines that have been unearthed are either of a female figurine or of the bull. Remember, in one of the earlier episodes on the origin of religion, we saw how fear was a factor that drove men to faith. Following fear, it was the emotion of awe, appreciation, and gratitude that made believers out of man. And here, the early man was in awe of the female because of her capacity to bear children. Just as a seed sown in the womb of the Mother Earth gave forth plentiful harvest and nurtured the worshippers, he considered the female to be the nurturer and caregiver of progeny. And even during Paleolithic times, there is evidence to show of how the caveman took care of the woman and child. This awe that bordered on reverence sowed the earliest seeds for the worship of the mother goddess. And the bull, the figurine of the bull, often represented the male power, which was associated though with animal husbandry and agriculture, also denoted the thundering crowds and pouring rains, a symbolism that is carried across many West Asian cultures. And look at this seal of a bull copulating with a female priestess. This shows that the bull, as Father Sky, is inseminating Mother Earth with pouring rains for a bountiful harvest, and similar such seal is found in Syria from 1400 BCE, where Baal is the name of the god of thunder and lightning, and he is symbolified as a bull, and Anath, the virgin goddess, is symbolified as a cow. Other than the bull, the water buffalo seems to have had a very close association with Mother Goddess, where if you see the seal, you will see a man driving a spear into a water buffalo. It was a sacrificial animal, and there is another interesting seal in Harappa, a cylinder seal discovered from Kalibangan, which shows a female deity riding a tiger, and she is a warrior goddess. How do we know this? In the same seal, there are two warriors flanking her image with spears in her hands. Now, this immediately makes us recollect our own protective fiery goddess of war, Kottravai, from Sangam times. The worship of Kottravai later evolved into the worship of goddess Durga. Now, this is explained in detail by Dr. Mahalakshmi in her PhD thesis for the Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, which she titles The Making of the Goddess, the Kottravai Durga Connect in Tamil Civilization. Here, she goes on to show through references in Sangam poetry as to how Sabdashringi, which is near Nashik in Maharashtra, is conceived as the original seat of goddess Durga and has been worshipped from time immemorial by the tribals there as well as the Marathas. Sabdashringi is denoted by the 7 hills, which correlates to Yel Il Kundram, belonging to the chieftain Nannan. And here is a very interesting song in Padittripattu, which traditionally sings the praises of Chera kings. This is song number 88, sung by Perungundur Kirar on Ilanjeral Irumborai. வையகம் மலர்ந்த தொழின்முறை ஒழியாது கடவுட்பெயரிய வானமொடு கல்லுயர்ந்து தென்கடல் வளைய மலர்தலை உலகத்து அனங்குடை கடம்பின் முழுமுதல் தடிந்து. Here, கடவுட்பெயரிய வானமோடு refers to Vinda Devi of the Vindhya hills, who is our Ma Durga. And Durga, associated with the water buffalo, immediately brings to our mind this image, which is our own Durgai at Patishwaram, which was the family deity of the Chola emperors who sacrificed a water buffalo here and prayed to the goddess before they went to war. And this sacrificing of the water buffalo continued as a ritualistic practice for a long time in the southern parts of the country and is conspicuous by its absence in northern India. And as early as 1931, Sir John Marshall also pointed out that how in the Vedic tradition, the most important animal in rituals was the horse, as in the Ashwamedha Yaga. Conspicuous by its absence, the horse is not found in the IVC regions at all. Now, starting from here, there is another seal where you see a female goddess sitting inside a fig tree, seal number M1186. Here again in the same poem, the line, Anangudai Kadambin Mulu Mudal Kadindu. There is a Kadamba tree and there is an Anangu, a female deity sitting within the tree. Parpola points out how the ancient kings during Sangam times all had a tutelary tree in their courtyards, which was a kind of a totemic symbol that offered protection to their city or country, and cutting down of the tree was considered to be an ominous act. And here in this Sangam poem, Perungundur Kirar, in praise of the Chera king, says, your forefathers cut down the Anangudai Kadambu, the Kadamba tree having the deity of the enemy king. And all the associations with trees such as neem, bilva, peepal and banyan are traced in many an Indus seal, with many of them also showing anthropomorphic images of deities sitting on these trees. Now, our ancestors were very big on tree worship, which continues to this day. And Parpola even mentions how some of the trees in the Mohenjo-daro region had protective railings around them, and this immediately reminds us of the concept of the Sthalavriksha that we have in our temples. Similarly, there is a seal that shows a cobra beneath a tree. And we know that the worshipping of the snake as a cult is found all across Southeast Asia and continues as a tradition even today. In the same Padittripattu poem number 88 is also this other line, Sudarvi Vahei Nannan Teithu, meaning that your ancestors killed the chieftain Nannan, whose tutelary tree was the bright Vahei. The song concludes with these two lines, Kurudi Vidirtha Kulavu Sotru Kundrodu Urugelu Marabin Airai Parayi. Here, the enemy soldiers who were killed, their blood was taken and mixed with mounds of rice and offered to this goddess Durga sitting on the hill of Airai, which is connected to Sabdashringi. And The concept of the sacred grove is very popular in the Tamil country, where Madurai once upon a time was Kadambavanam, Chidambaram was Thillaivanam, and Tirunelveli was Veivanam, meaning the bamboo tree. And you also have Alangadu, Maraikadu, Thiruvenkadu, and even today, though we have lost many of these groves, the sacred association still continues. And the noted historian Madhav Gadgil has this to say: the grove was said to be the origin of the temple, whose columns were initially trees. Now we know that today in almost all temples in Tamil country, we have something known as the Kodimaram. Our ancestors in these sacred groves looked at these large trees which had these creepers around them, and this was considered to be a holy sign of fertility. And the Kodimaram was symbolifying this. And if you see even today, though it is a metal structure, you will see the imagery of a creeper around these tall poles, which are supposed to resemble a tree with the vines around it. Let us conclude by looking at a sutram from Tolgapiyam that directly points to this custom. கொடிநிலை கந்தளி வள்ளி என்ற வடுநீங்கு சிறப்பின் முதலன மூன்றும் கடவுள் வாழ்த்தோடு கண்ணிய வருமே, where கொடிநிலை refers to the கொடிமரம். We will continue with this in the next episode. வணக்கம்.